I'm Yuka Takahashi, a curator from Arts Maebashi, which is a sitting lab museum in Gunma, Japan. Today, I would like to speak three things and hopefully get to introduce a bit about myself, as well as what is like curating from regional Japan. So first, I would like to introduce my journey to become a curator, because it's a bit odd journey. Then I would like to introduce about the current exhibition, which is called Liquidscape, Southeast Asia Today, and a bit of story of making the international show at a museum. And lastly, I would like to share some thoughts on curating in regional Japan. To start, I would like to introduce my journey of why I got to the job at Arts Maebashi, because my journey of becoming curator is rather odd, because I didn't take a common path of becoming a curator. Usually in Japan, to become a curator, you study at art university and you learn art history, but I didn't come from completely different path. So back in 2013, I graduated university in Tokyo, which I majored English literature. And after that, I worked in advertisement agency, and I also worked as a magazine editor in a digital magazine house. With that, during the time, I was quite passionate about how data can feed creativity in digital world, and that passion kind of led me to study in a design school in Stockholm. And during 2015 to 2016, I was studying digital design and digital strategy in Stockholm. And this kind of landed me to this job opportunity in Paris at Ogilvy, which is an advertisement agency belonging to the WPP group, which I think is the world's largest communication advertisement group. And during 2016 to 2020, I was working there as a strategic planner, being each in charge of creating brand strategy, communication strategy for those international companies such as Nestle, Chanel, and Mondelez. Even though the job was very exciting, which enabled me to travel different countries and working in a very dynamic environment in a very global scale, which was super exciting, but I was struggling at the time because in this job, the better I do my job, the more I am kind of selling the product people might not need. And especially in this world where so many products existing and we are filled with so many things that we ever needed, I was kind of question myself if I want to continue this career in the rest of my life. With that realization, even though I really love working in this company and of course love living in Paris, I decided to come back to Japan. And that was 2021. I was exploring different careers, and I luckily got a job as an international program coordinator at Tokyo Biennial. And that was the very first job I started in art field. And in this job, I was in charge of 12 artists who come for the artist residency program for the biennial. And I helped them to to create their work, and I helped them to create their installation plan and so on. Even though, because it was during pandemic, unfortunately, none of them managed to come to Japan because it was a lockdown. But the experience surely left me some confidence of pursuing this job in this art field, because vision that each artist tried to embody through their creation are social and critical. And I thought if there is something move society forward ethically and humanely, arts and culture would take the major role. And I wanted to be part of it and make the change instead of just being the audience of produced work. To make this passion a reality, I decided to study master's in curating contemporary design. Why design? Because I wanted to utilize my previous background in design and communication. And also, I was very much interested in this field of design that specifically asks critical questions of the contemporary world, which often intersects with the field of contemporary art, the field the field of design is called critical design. And according to MoMA, critical design refers to an attitude towards design rather than a movement or method. It follows in the footsteps of other practices, such as radical design in Italy and avant-garde British architecture of the late 16th and early 1970s, that have regarded design as a way to pose incisive questions, challenge status quo, and think deeply about the future with consequences of present choices. And it is also important that critical design does not always lead to usable product, but it does produce long-term thinking, a nuanced view of consumer as complex, contradictory individual, and alternative solutions suggesting change is always possible, even inevitable. And to just give you a bit of example of how the critical design looks like, I want to introduce this project by Thomas Twain's called the Toaster Project. Thomas is a graduate of Royal College of Art in London, and he has built a working toaster, which you see in this picture, but from scratch. And he created this toaster, extracting raw materials and processing them himself in an attempt to replicate a mass-produced toaster, which he bought in a shop less than £5. And Thomas used this project to explore how cheap everyday items are dependent on sophisticated global supply chain that are invisible to consumers. And I think this kind of critical design is a very important, and practice is pretty much needed in this time of the era that we live right now. The era we live now is often referred as the Anthropocene, and the term is increasingly used to define a new planetary epoch when human activity started to have a significant impact on the planet's climate and ecosystems. And during my master's, I was researching a lot about this anthropologist named Alto Escobar. And according to him, this kind of Anthropocene or contemporary crisis that we are facing right now is a crisis of modern civilizational model. And he thinks it has been firmly built upon the singular worldview, understanding the world through categorization and hierarchical dualism, such as regarding the world through divide between nature, culture, us, them, subject, object, and this creating a whole series of other divisions, such as human, non-human, reason, emotions, ideas, feeling, the individual, the collective, science, no science, and so on. And according to Escobar, this worldview, regarded as the only true worldview, is the fundamental form of today's civilizational model and requires an ontological shift, moving forward to a pluriversal future through relational world understanding. And this is kind of the why I decided to curate, especially in design, to create relational world understanding to move society forward outside of the Anthropocene. And yes, so it's my career story. So of course now, with all this journey, now I work at Arts Maebashi. And I was very lucky because after coming back from my MA in London, I was introduced to Mr. Fumio Nanjo, who has been just appointed as an executive director of Arts Maebashi during the time. And he was forming a new team, and I was invited to be part of his team. So I think you might want to know what's like working in art museum, especially in regional museum. So I want to share some reality of what's like working in regional museum. So Arts Maebashi is run by Maebashi City, and the job as a curator at regional museum is much required multitasking. To create exhibition, curator wears different hats, sometimes scholars, fundraiser, installers, even janitors. And after the show open, it's also my job to create each Instagram post and Twitter post and associating text to make sure the exhibition is well promoted on social media. And I think these tasks often is more divided in bigger museum, in bigger city. But because Maebashi is a city with only 300,000 population, we have challenging resources. For example, in the museum, we are a team of 7 curators working in the museum. But out of 7, 2 are executive and not full-time workers. This means we only have 5 curators working in full-time. And of course, we don't have PR staff, in-house installer, or fundraiser. So whatever it takes required to prepare and open the exhibition, it's pretty much all curators' job. And this job might sound very chaotic, and I think it is. But somehow my skill sets acquiring along this winding journey to be here, such as like magazine editor, strategic planner, project manager, and master student, are somehow kind of coming together as one job as a curator. And this feels like my calling. And I'm very passionate about this job because every day I'm doing completely different things, but all come together at the end as a form of one exhibition. With all these skills and chaotic task, the very recent exhibition and very first international exhibition I curated has been opened in September this year, and it's named Liquidscape. It actually opens until December 24th this month, so please come visit us if you are interested after this show. And we have participating artists, the 12th group of participating artists, which is 18 people. And we are showcasing 22 artworks from 6 countries. The show actually is an invitation to artists' pluralistic imagination and their relational understanding of the world that challenge our contemporary worldview and modes of thinking. And it was very important for me. This show is not to just introduce Southeast Asia through artwork, but it's rather through artwork and imagination emerge from Southeast Asia. I wanted to create an exhibition that aims to unlearn the dualist worldview, which we all adapted since modernization. So the show is now successfully on run and we have receiving great feedback from media and audience. But when I first started researching for the show, I had a very difficult beginning because the more I researched about the region, the more I struggled to define the region. I was questioning, what is Southeast Asia? And it almost felt impossible to capture the full picture of the region, and I could only grasp the fragments. And actually, the same struggle was experienced on the very first show that is featuring Southeast Asian contemporary art back in 1990s. And the curator, Mr. Masahiro Ushiro Shoji, is opening up his essay by saying like this. He says, in discussing contemporary ASEAN art, it will be necessary for us to first ask ourselves whether such a thing as contemporary ASEAN art really exists at all. The most natural and easiest answer to this question would be there is no such thing as contemporary ASEAN art. What exists is merely contemporary art of the Philippines, that of Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, or Brunei. And this sentence pretty much shows the long-lasting struggle of curator creating the show about the region. But luckily, I encountered with words by Ho Tzu-nyen. So Ho Tzu-nyen is a world-renowned artist from Singapore, and his solo show was just held at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Tokyo this spring. And his work often investigates the plurality of cultural identities in Southeast Asia, especially one of his iconic work, which you can see here, named The Critical Dictionary of Southeast Asia. Through this work, he explored the following question. he questions what constitutes the unity of Southeast Asia, a region never unified by language, religion, or political power. Through this work, Critical Dictionary of Southeast Asia, he explores a concept, a motif, or biography associating with the region in alphabetical order. Through this, he captures the image of Southeast Asian world, which are constantly being generated through connection and differences without producing a uniform, fixed representation. So during my research, I encountered one of his interview, and he was referring his work and explaining his perspective on Southeast Asia as ever shape-shifting entity. And this world suggests, I think, his perspective recognizing Southeast Asia in and of itself as a living organism rather than a fixed region. Accepting the fluidity is a state of existence. And inspired by this Tsunen's way of pursuing the region, the world Liquidscape was created. And it's a term that refers to multi-layeredness, diversity, and liquidity of the region. And also, with this term, it was very important for me to refer to the current state of the world that is fluid, caused by wars, environmental crisis, economical gap, and human-centered destruction mode of being. And with that thinking in mind, I constructed the show in 4 chapters. Each of them asks one question that is inspired by the artworks. And all these questions are something that anyone living in this contemporary society can explore from their own context without having in-depth knowledge of the region. So, to introduce from the first chapter is called Words Entangling. And in this section, we are asking the question, is region nation one or plural? For example, this work you see here is a work by Geger Boyo, who is a 3-member art collective from Yogyakarta in Indonesia. And they explore the multi-layered history and entangled civilization that created Java as is today. And the second chapter, After the Acceleration, asks, is development a progress or a distraction? This chapter explores the validity and ethicality of the current situation where we are dominated by the human-centered thinking driven by the value of technological and economical development. And in this chapter, we are introducing a work by Witpim Kanachanapong from Thailand. And he created this maze that is floating in the space. This maze changes the route infinitely every 5 minutes, portraying the human floating and wandering with no direction and visions in this world. And the third chapter, Counter Narratives of Femininity, asks, how might we deconstruct the dominant narrative? From a feminist point of view, this chapter reveals that male-dominated society and worlds emerge from such thinking. For example, this work by Kawita Batanajanko from Thailand performs the tools that represents houseworks predominantly undertaken by women. This facial expression of the artist depicts the unbearable burden of the work that has been imposed on women, while the work itself is in colorful, sophisticated, superficial sophistication, almost like in advertisement, depicting these realities that are uncovered and unseen. The last chapter, Drifting Loops and Circulation, asks, how might we unlearn dualist worldview? And this chapter showcases the film installation by Korakrit Arnu Nonchai from Thailand, but now based in Bangkok and New York. He explores, through his work, he explores everyday events such as death of family member and global political situation as reported through media, cultural clash of traditional myth and modern technology, and its struggle. The work explores such topic through cosmic and spiritual framework, inviting us to these in-between worlds that exists between life and death, birth and destruction, and earth and cosmos, with very poetic narrative. And these four chapters asks critical question of our time, and these, I think, are the question urged to ask ourselves in the Anthropocene, where our current system is dysfunctional, and we need relational understanding of the world and reposition human existence in this ecosystem. And it was very important for me that these kind of global topics are suggested and proposed and questioned in Maebashi, which is outside of megacities. And I also intentionally curated experiential works to immerse the audience in such questions so that people who are not accustomed to such topic or the region can feel and think something from their own context. And this show is, of course, now run at Arts Maebashi. And I want to give you a bit of context of what is Arts Maebashi and how the surrounding environment would look like. So, Arts Maebashi is founded in 2013, and it's actually a converted architecture. So, this building used to be a department store. And this architectural design was intended to create a walking pathway around the museum. So as you can see here, these big glass windows are along the old museums, inviting audience in who might not be so interested in art. And I think personally, the most interesting thing about this museum is the location. It's located at the city center, where a local shopping arcade is just a few minutes by walk. The museum is located inside of local people's everyday living. But back in 2013, the situation was quite tough. So this was at the time when the museum opened, the city was quite dead. Back in 2013, this kind of cityscape was even showcased on Japanese history textbook, which represents a typical shuttered street created by depopulation of regional Japan. But as Hidaka-san earlier mentioned, this city is in transformation. Since 2016, the revitalization had started. And this was driven by the founder of Jeans, a glassware company in Japan, and whose founder is named Hitoshi Tanaka. And Mr. Tanaka from Maebashi was very devastated by the situation that his hometown is kind of falling off. So he decided to start his design and art project in the city. And he started to invest in this project right after the museum opening. So what you see here on the top is the Shiroye Hotel, which is designed by So Fujimoto, and it's an art hotel. So each room is dedicated for each artist's artwork. And inside of the hotel, you see this kind of public artwork by Leandro Erlichi. And also, we have new art spot opened last year, which is called Maebashi Galleria. This is designed by Akihisa Hirata, another Japanese famous architect. And inside of the building, we have four galleries, which is very famous galleries, such as Takaishi Gallery, Koyama Tomio Gallery, Lin Art Association, and Maki Gallery, and so on. And to further cultivate this revitalization, last year, Arts Maebashi organized a 10th anniversary exhibition, which almost is like a biennial. We use unique abandoned building and iconic city sites, such as postmodern buildings previously filled with cabaret, as well as shopping arcade. So this kind of like old building we used to install the work of Mika Ninagawa in the cabaret space, or like we installed the stone cloud, which is floating in the sky by Andre Binkley in the shopping arcade. And I think working in such a transitional city is very exciting. And in my opinion, the city itself is kind of inspiring three new roles of curators. Because in this kind of city, like we can't just stay in the museum because we have limited resources. So we need to slightly shift our roles and skills to adapt to the city. So the first, the curator as a producer, who reframes exhibition, its meaning and format. And curator as producer, it's very important that this person creates a project vision and raise funding. And the second, curator as program builder, who curate beyond artwork and also plan meaningful activities resonating with local context, as well as the global situation and topics. Last not but least, the future of curator also has to be a good team builder, onboarding more collaborator outside of the museum, and also facilitating teams for good collaboration and ensuring the team's high engagement to create impactful project within limited budget. And me personally speaking, while exploring this role, I would also like to keep exploring curating as means of critical revealing. That is to reveal critical topics that are difficult to see and understand in our time. Because to make change in the Anthropocene, we all need to learn and understand why we got here at the first place. Otherwise, we are only recreating the same future with no future. And I believe curating can be a great intervention. Asking audience questions, what needs to be learned, unlearned, discussed right now. In museum and outside, in Maebashi and even outside of Japan, I would like to curate at the intersection of contemporary art and critical design to ask meaningful questions that we all need to think about in the Anthropocene. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuka, for such a wonderful presentation. I think we all learned so much about your journey, about the exhibition, as well as Maebashi. Before we open up for Q&A to the floor, I've got some questions I'd like to ask you. I think one of the things that was really interesting for me, especially in terms of the city of Maebashi, and each time that I go, it's going through so many changes. It's remarkable. So if you haven't been, please visit. But can you kind of tell us, we just, you just had mentioned about contemporary art and design. Can you tell us about the difference between contemporary art and design, from your background as well?
Yeah. So I think usually people think design is like usable. Design is embedded in everyday life. And I think that's the biggest difference between art and design. So design, even critical design, its starting point is everyday object or everyday lifestyle. And even though the outcome of the design is not usable, it's kind of like a interventing to the everyday life or referring to the everyday life. So I think the biggest difference between art and design is if it's embedded in everyday life or not. But when you see more about like a contemporary art, I feel like it's more like intersecting. Like for example, some contemporary art, especially coming from like a technology, like a media art, asks like critical question about our usage of technology, and those are actually intersecting with the field of critical design.
So I guess, with your editor's background, editing magazines and putting your exhibition as well as your presentation now in different chapters, was that part of, putting together the design, and how did you, want to present that when you put it into chapters?
In the exhibition setting.
Exhibitions, yeah.
I think, yeah, like it's actually a very exciting process for me because in magazine and in advertisement, like I create things on paper, but in museum setting, you need to create narrative in the space, so which is very different. But I think the process of creating narratives in the exhibition is you first create a big theme and you kind of try to understand how each artwork will speak to each other so that there will create narrative between artworks. and you kind of map out each artwork in the space and think if this narrative actually makes sense or not.
Can you tell us the reception of the people in Maebashi as well as people visiting from outside Maebashi with regards to the current exhibition?
Yeah, so it's a very positive and negative in a good way. So the negative is because people kind of surprised because a lot of people who come to the show were not expecting to see such work, and a lot of people are kind of accepting to see like a traditional painting from Southeast Asia with crafts and so on. But this exhibition actually like out of 12 groups, eight groups are born after 1980s, so they're very young. So their like a creation is so much beyond our expectations. So people will get very shocked. So that's a negative good side. And the positive side is that people think like their perception of Southeast Asia has changed through this exhibition. That's the good feedback that we are receiving, because as I earlier mentioned, this exhibition is not really trying to introduce Southeast Asia through artwork, but to kind of invite everyone to the pluralistic imagination through their artwork. So I think some people get this kind of intention and enjoying this the feeling of kind of shocked and unexpected, seeing unexpected creations.
I'm Johnny Waka. I do a small nonprofit art foundation in Tokyo for 40 years, like PS1 in New York. We give a free space for avant-garde,
Wow.
and we do artists in residence. And I'm just curious about the local reaction. It's great what you're doing. You're like a pioneer, especially in that Guma area, and being part of the revival of the town is very exciting. But was the using mostly non-Japanese artists
Yeah.
in this show,
Yeah.
the local reaction, was it disappointing? They wanted more Japanese contemporary art, or were they fascinated by the exotic of South Asia coming to Maebashi?
I think it's pretty much divided. Like young people are very excited to see this kind of creation, especially like young people resonate to their expression because most of the artists participating in the show is like post-internet generation. But that's half of I would say audience, but the other half is more they want to see more like a paintings, like a beautiful paintings. And so in that sense, they're not quite keen to see contemporary art in general. And like for example, last year we did collection exhibition, and those people would be very happy to see that kind of exhibition where we showcase a lot of paintings from Japan and outside.
But my question was regarding South Asia, with the older generation disappointed that it was not more Japanese rather than South Asian, where younger people will maybe be fascinated with the exotic
Yeah.
aspect of South Asia. But Maebashi can be more traditional and demanding more Japanese.
I'm not sure that. Hmm, I don't think they're demanding more Japanese artwork, but they're demanding more traditional like artworks. So I think it doesn't so much matter whether we are showcasing Southeast Asian or not, but they are kind of keen to see more traditional artworks.
I see.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Hello, my name is Jason Bong. I'm from Asia Society, Northern California. I guess visiting here from Tokyo. I'm just curious, finding contemporary artwork from ASEAN nations can be a challenge. How much of a challenge was it, considering some of those nations are more conservative in their beliefs, more traditional in their beliefs? That was the first part of my question, how challenging it was to find artists of that style, as well as can you discuss any future projects that you may consider now that once this is wrapped up and for 2025 and beyond?
Thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
the question. So for the first question, as Hidaka-san earlier mentioned, the exhibition, we only had almost 6 months to prepare for the show. So it was very limited time. And luckily, Mr. Fumio Nanjo, who is an executive director of Arts Maebashi, is also a board member of Singapore Art Museum. So we had a support from Singapore Art Museum to do research. For example, like we received their list of collection in the film. So I watched all their film and to kind of understand what are the ecosystem of Southeast Asian art right now. And also through Nanjo-san's help, I got introduced to some collectors in Southeast Asia, and they have very like up-to-date knowledge about who is creating good works right now. So I interviewed them quite a lot and yeah, try to find work that fit to the theme. And also I went to the research trip for just 2 weeks to visit all the art centers, museums, artist studios, and galleries to see work by myself and also to interview them, the experts, to understand like what's happening right now. So that's for the first question. And to answer the second question, my future project. So it's still not yet decided. But my vision of next exhibition is about design, but the critical design and speculative design. And right now the theme is still rough, but I want to create an exhibition that is about designing for the end of the world. But end of the world as we know today, the world that is dominated by this like logic and the dualist worldview. And I want to introduce design and also maybe artwork to kind of intervene and flip the perception of the world that we live in right now. So that I hope to do it maybe 2026. Yes, hopefully, yes.
Hi, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I'm Takako Hikotani from Asia Society, Japan. I have two questions. One is how I really enjoyed the exhibition and how you presented it, but do you reach out to people outside of Maebashi, possibly in Tokyo, and also people who are interested not just in the arts, but the social message that you're trying to convey? The reason why I ask is my field is political science, and I think the title, Liquidscape, is very interesting, and there's a lot of people interested in contemporary Southeast Asia that may not be interested from the arts angle, but will be still interested. And they may not be in Maebashi, and they might not be in the arts world. So I was wondering if you can outreach to maybe universities in Tokyo, or what kind of things you might do, because I think it's mottainai to leave it just in Maebashi in the form that it is. So that's the first part of the question. And if I may ask the second question, I thought your journey of your career path was very interesting. And I also teach at a university. And I know some students want to become curators, but they think it's a little too late because they majored in economics or something very different. They didn't go to art school, or they didn't major in art history. But your career suggests that it's still possible. So what message do you have to college students who are interested in becoming a curator, but don't know what to do in the next couple of years? Do you have any advice to what they should be doing? Is it the language skills, or is it visiting more museums? If you have any advice to aspiring curators.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Sorry for the long question,
No,
but you.
thank you very much for such a wonderful question. To answer the first part of the question, that's actually I didn't think about. I was quite, as you saw, the job at the regional museum is so hectic that I am quite occupied by doing like everyday work, and I didn't actually think about how to reach out to people who are outside of art and outside of Maebashi. And this is actually the very first opportunity that I had to introduce the exhibition outside of Maebashi, and also in international setting. So thank you so much for that. But I think, as you said, like my my focus and my interest in my master's was also like anthropology and post-Anthropocene and so on. So I think even though people are not interested in art, I think the message that each artwork is kind of conveying is very like much inspiring for those like scholars and maybe students. So if I have the opportunity to do such like a lecture or discussion, like I think I would like to do that, but I haven't done yet. And to answer the second question, I think to become a curator who so me becoming a curator who haven't studied art history, I think it's important to kind of connect your previous experience to kind of form a message that you only can create. Because I think there's so many talented curator in this art industry, and I think I can be any better than them if I am doing like regular art history, for example, introducing Southeast Asian art through the lens of art history or regional history. That I don't think I can. So I think for those young people who want to be a curator, they should find their own voice. That is rooted in their background and their study and experience, so that their voice will be unique and it will kind of be like heard and it will be found by those like a big art person like Nanjo-san and so on. Yeah, thank you.
Do you think that contemporary art is representative of human life in the modern world?
Mm, I think so, but I feel like I'm not the person who can say if it is or not because I'm not the expert of contemporary art. Uh, but as long as what I see, and also it's also because of my filter, like why I love art, because art is a way to capture the contemporary like topics and issues and the visions for the future. That's why I love art. So with me having that vision, when I see art, I always have this filter that I am looking for such art. So I feel like I can say the contemporary art captures the current human living, but I think it depends who you ask the question. And I feel like I'm not the person who can give the right answer.
With being a curator, and you said you had mentioned that you have 7 curators at Arts Maebashi. How do you work together as a team? And because it's not, it's not that many people, and you said that you have 4 different exhibitions per year. So I'm just curious how you work together as a team.
Yeah, so usually in one exhibition, there is a main curator and sub-curator. And the main curator kind of select the theme and curate artworks, and sub-curator will support like all necessary work. So usually we organize one exhibition with 2 people. But because we only have 5 full-time curators and we have 4 shows every year, uh, I, for example, do another exhibition in January, but which is small, much smaller. So some people will do 2 exhibition 1 year, but always working with a team of 2.
In terms of reaching out to your audiences, as a curator, what do you do?
So I think in Arts Maebashi is we don't have so much like followers on social media. So it's important for us to organize like programs, like a talk program, inviting artists, and so that people will come to see it. And for example, like tomorrow, I am organizing a talk, online talk session inviting a curator from Singapore Art Museum, and she will introduce the situation of contemporary art in Southeast Asia right now. So those kind of program, and also we create Instagram advertisement in a video format, so that maybe people who don't know at all about Arts Maebashi can find the exhibition and be interested.
Each time I go to Maebashi, I'm just blown away of how much change that goes and change in a good way that's going on, and how people are becoming more. They seem more happy rather than the first time that I went. And so I'm just wondering, today we have Morita-san
Yeah.
from Shiroya Hotel here today. And so I'm wondering, how do you collaborate with other organizations or that is around your area? How do you collaborate with them?
Yeah. So like to collaborate, we usually create so last year we did this biennial like exhibition directed by Mr. Fumio Nanjo. And in this exhibition, we are very keen to expand our venue outside of the museum because in Maebashi, there are quite a lot of abandoned building, which is very unique to the history, unique to the city, as well as it tells the history of Maebashi. So we use those buildings to introduce site-specific work. And that's like a first way to collaborate with people outside of the museum. And Shiroya Hotel was kindly being part of the show, and yeah, we installed the work by Mika Ninagawa at the Shiroya Hotel. And also, because Arts Maebashi locates at the city center, it's important for us to create an art project that is based in, that happens within the city. Like, for example, last year in summer, I have curated this show by our architectural collective called 403 Architecture Dajiba. And this project is to gather chairs from all the people living in Maebashi and to kind of create a narrative map of the city. Because city usually does not being only designed by architects and politicians, but it's actually created by everyday people's everyday living. So to portray that, I created this project inviting all people living in Maebashi. So I think there are a lot of ways to invite people outside of the museum, but I think what Arts Maebashi is best at is creating like socially engaged project in the city so that people can onboard to create artwork and to be part of the art project.
Yes, we have another question from Sarah. Thank you so much for the presentation. Could you please share your advice on the most important points for creating an exhibition in regional Japan?
The most important.
3 points.
I think in this international exhibition, it was important that we create a theme that everyone, like even people in Maebashi or outside of Maebashi or outside of Japan, can think about from their own context. So that's why the Liquidscape is a title, because it's referring to the multi-layeredness of Southeast Asia, as well as referring to all this like a contemporary situation of the world. And that was important in this exhibition because it was international exhibition. But I think for other I think in each exhibition has different important point, because each aims has like different purposes and different audience. But for this exhibition, Liquidscape, the most important thing was creating a theme that can be understood and explored by everyone in the world.
But as I listen to your answers, maybe just comments and friendly advice in doing things in Maebashi, because one of your jobs as a curator is also to educate the public
Yeah.
and to make it accessible so they get it. You lead them. It's like fishing. You bring in the fish, and I think two curators that you could learn from if you look at their work and how to make bring in the older generation of Maebashi and even the young generation, educate them more to the concepts that you're doing, is to always have historical reference included in the exhibition. So you can have historical artwork leading up to the contemporary that relates to it, so people understand where you're coming from and where the contemporary art is coming from. And the older generation will say, "Oh, I get it now." You know, so good people in doing this. Your leading curator using historical reference is David Elliott,
Yeah.
who was the first director of the Mori Art Museum. So if you look at the exhibitions that he's been doing, or the exhibitions he did at the Mori, there's lots of historical reference included in the exhibition relating to the contemporary. And the other person, the artist that does this is Hiroshi Sugimoto, mixing the antiquities with the contemporary. And also, were you at the this year at the Bangkok Biennale?
Yeah.
So this year was the best Biennale they ever did. So
it.
Apinan, the curator, he's also good. As you saw in the Biennale, there's historical reference to the contemporary. And this might be a point you can bring up in Maebashi, saying, instead of saying it's a public art museum, this is what we do, and if you get it, fine. If not, that's okay, because we're a public art museum, we can make everyone happy. You can work on making everyone happy by educating the people with historical reference to the contemporary.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think to kind of compensate the exhibition, we are doing like a lecture, like a guided tour. And this tour, I start with the history of Southeast Asia. Then like going into the exhibition, so that each artwork, for example, yesterday I was inviting the students from Gunma University, and I was giving lecture of the history of Southeast Asian art. And after that, I'm introducing them to the exhibition, so that all this like history, each artist are referring to, that the students has more deeper understanding of what it is.
I see. Very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So this is a question from me, and you know, you're working with wonderful curators, starting with Nanjo-san. Where, since you've had a different career in the past, where do you see your career going in the future? Where do you want to be in, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years time?
Well, I I think I want to, maybe like it's a huge dream, but maybe like in somehow, maybe not 10 years, but in somewhere in my career, maybe 60s or 70s, I want to curate a biennial somewhere like inside of Japan or outside of Japan. And because like I think biennial, like it gives me a lot of opportunity for me to learn about the city and learn about the local artists and so on, and that I have never done outside of Maebashi. So with that, yeah, that I want to do in my career sometime in the future.
Besides Nanjo-san, do you have like an idol in the curatorial world that you want to, that you respect?
Maybe Mami Kataoka-san.
Great.
Yeah.
Right. Well, she's my idol too.
Yeah.
So with that, if there's no more question, I'd like to close today's session.